events must be considered not merely as a historical phenomenon, but it must be seen in context. Context is terribly important, because it isn't just when a thing happens that is important, it's where it happens. In what setting? So that you could say that my blood in my veins is in a certain setting. In a test tube, it's in a completely different setting. And in a test tube, my blood is not behaving in the way it behaves in my veins. And therefore, it's not the same thing. So, an individual person in one setting will behave in one way, in another setting in a completely different way. I remember when I was a child. I was one boy when I was at home with my parents. When I went to visit my uncle and aunt, I was someone different. When I was with my peers, I was someone quite different. Because I changed according to the setting, and children are very well aware of this. It's only as we go on that we keep having it drummed into our heads that we ought to have a consistent character, because we're influenced by novels, where the characters are supposed to be consistent. And so you ought to have a consistent character. You ought to behave the same in all circumstances and towards all people. That merely means you become inflexible. So what things are, therefore, depend on the context in which they're found, upon their network relationship to everything else that's going on. And one of the reasons for this, which is going to lead us to something more profound but much simpler, is, of course, that the whole notion of a thing or of an event in nature and of causal relationships between different things and different events is a purely abstract idea that does not really fit the facts of nature at all. In nature, in what this physical world that you feel when you hold your head or hold somebody's hand or just breathe, in that world, there aren't any separate events. None whatever. Sure, there are all sorts of wiggles around here, all sorts of lines, all sorts of colors, all sorts of surfaces, all sorts of forms. But they're not separate. Because you see, you can't separate an inside, what you are inside your skin, from the outside of the skin. Because you can see that at once. If there weren't anything outside your skin, there'd be no inside. It takes the outside and the inside working together to create this situation. And in the simplest way, the situation that I call my body wouldn't be operating unless there was air around here to breathe. This physical phenomenon goes with the situation of there being air. Now, true, it wiggles about inside the air in a rather complicated way. And other people watching say, oh, something going on over there. You know, because the air you can't see and it remains rather constant, except when there's a gale. And so you don't pay much attention to it because it's always around. What you pay attention to is what changes rather rapidly. And you say, well, that's a that. Say, hey, you say to someone, you see the change going on, some wiggling over there, say, what's that? See? And he knows what you mean by a that. A that means something on the end of a finger point. It's different. It's peculiar. See? Now that's a that. So from that comes the idea of an event or a thing, a that. But all these that's that are happening aren't disconnected. They go with each other, just as I go with the surrounding air. And just as this whole situation in which we are at this moment is a complicated going withness. Now here then we get to the fundamental idea, this idea of going with. And from this we shall be able to construct the whole notion of network. And this is the idea I said at the beginning. It is extremely simple, but very difficult for people brought up to use Western languages to understand. Now, going withness, we could call it relativity, relationship means simply, let me first of all put it in a very extreme form. Consider yourself, sitting here at this moment, being just exactly the sort of person you are. Maybe a little neurotic, maybe a little sick physically, maybe a little ashamed of yourself for some reason or other, or whatever, you know? Just the way you are anyway, just like that, sitting here. That situation goes with, as back goes with front, the entire situation of the rest of the universe. In other words, you, as you are, exactly the way you are, and you really don't know what that is. You may have some opinions about it, but you really don't know. That goes with the way the whole of the rest of boundless being is arranged. Now, it isn't that the way the rest of boundless being is arranged is determining you to be the way you are. Or if it is that, if that's true, if it determines you, then we must also allow the other side of the picture that you determine it. It's your karma. You did it. But you say, no, but I didn't help it. It did me. And you can say, tisn't, like two children arguing until you realize that the argument was stupid. Because you and it are one event. It isn't a question of it controlling you or you controlling it. It's all one event. As Teilhard de Chardin said, the whole universe is the only true atom, the only truly indivisible whole. The human being, though, finds this difficult to understand because we're always telling each other, now you should be different. You ought to change. You ought to be like that. Now listen, you're sick, and I got a system. See, I got a system. I've got a real school here, a thing that's very important, and you should come and study with that. It may not be mine, but it may be some big sage or pundit that I know, and you should come around and study that. And I've thought about this for a long time, because I've heard every kind of opinion of all the sorts of things that I should do in order to get myself into shape. And I realized that if I followed this advice, I would spend my entire day doing exercises in preparation for life. I don't know when I'll ever get around to that. You know, I would have my half an hour's yoga practice, 1 hour of zazen, so much physical exercises, and so much memory practice, so much special diet preparation to be sure that I got proper food. And if I think this all through, I think, oh my God, it isn't worth it. Then another school of thought will say, no, that's the thing, you're getting confused. Just do one thing, see? Just, but then I say, now how am I going to choose which one I'm going to do? Well, he says, obviously this one's the best. And then before you know where you are, you're sewed up by some religious fanatic. Now, please, I don't want to do this to you. Please don't think that I have any such recipe that I'm going to give you anything to do for 5 minutes every morning. I just am not. I want to, my whole notion would be to set you all free so that you'd only have to attend one seminar, never have to come back. That's the idea, really. Because I know that so far as my own livelihood is concerned, that there are always more people. And if, no, I don't collect a following and just send them all away. There are plenty more people to fill the vacuum. But this is the whole idea that we're going to work on of a net. That you are like a dewdrop on a multidimensional spider's web early in the morning. And if you look at that thing carefully, you will see that in every dewdrop are the reflections of all the other dewdrops. So the way that dewdrop looks goes with the way all the other ones look. See? The particular glimmer in it and so on. Its peculiar position, and everybody has to have a peculiar position in the cosmos. The reflections in every one of them are different, according to the position they're in and the other dewdrops that they reflect at such and such angles. But nevertheless, the whole network, all the dewdrops, depend on each individual dewdrop. And each individual dewdrop mutually depends on all the others. And that's the sort of a scheme we're living in. And it a little bit affronts our logic at first, because we say, I can understand that I depend on this universe, because after all, I need sunlight and air and water and the help of the society and all that kind of thing. I needed a father and mother. But looking at it from the other point of view, I find it very difficult to see how the whole thing depends on me. That's because we've been brought up with a put-down theory of the individual. No, children should be seen and not heard. You are the servant and subject of God, and don't you ask impertinent questions. Or another way of putting us down is to say, well, you're just a piece of a fluke in a mindless mechanism. See? So we always managed not to find out that the relationship of the network is mutual. It runs both ways. That it depends on you just as much as you depend on it. Because you see, it's you with your ingenious brain that, for example, turns vibrations of air into sound. You turn whatever the sun is doing into light. You turn whatever the air is doing into a sky called blue. There is only blue for a brain. It's just like if you hit a drum and it's got no skin, it won't make any noise. So it's the tight skin that evokes the noise out of a moving fist. No skin, no noise. So you, as the reflector, like the dewdrop reflects, you, as the so-called reflector of all that goes on, by the constitution of what kind of a reflector you are, you evoke what we call sun, moon, and stars.
I was talking to the 17-year-old girl, not you, when I said the annoying thing, you know? And then they kicked you. But it was funny because you thought I was talking, everyone thought I was talking to you.
Oh, man. So I'm listening to Alan Watts. It's an interesting lecture. I hope you have a great day, but I have to get going. And anything else you want to say before I hit the play button again?
Yeah, you're always on the run.
Yeah, I got to get to the gym. Oh, she's always on the run.
Nebulae. Vast spaces. They're only vast in relation to you. They're not really vast. Only if you compare them with yourself, they're vast. They could be considered very tiny. Or equally, the space between two sides of a hair could be considered vast if you want to think about it that way. I mean, if you really want to go into a hair, an awful lot between one diameter of a hair, you know. And if you think about it a long time, you'll think it's what we call a vast subject. Study it. For microscopy, it is a vast subject. It depends on the attitude, you see. But the basic principle, the thing I really want to try and get across, is this idea of going with. The universe around you is your outside, just as much as the organs inside your skin are your inside. You go with it in the same way that the stalk goes with the root or with the flower. And as front goes with back, as north pole of magnet goes with south pole. This principle of relationship governs everything. I wouldn't say governs. I'm only using these wretched terms that we have to use out of our language. It underlies everything. And it's important to realize, and let me repeat this, that the great universe does not control the small individual any more than the small individual actually controls the great universe. This is not a question of controlling. It is a question of more like dancing, of what happens, rather than what makes it happen. Things aren't made to happen. Only if you insist that a certain event is quite separate, then you can think of it being made to happen by the events that came before it. But if you realize they're all parts of one event, or different aspects, different phases of one event, then you see it happening and you don't see anything making it happen. Forcing, that whole idea of things being made to happen, in other words, goes back to the idea of a universe that is based on a monarchical image, where the boss says, damn it, you do that, and the thing can't help it, and so it's made to happen. But say in Chinese Taoist philosophy, the universe is just not seen in that way. It's not seen as anything is not made to happen. It is what does happen, but it's all interrelated. And therefore there is a pattern to it. There is an order to it. The order of the net.